I love goalkeeping. I love the whole art of goalkeeping. I love the whole science behind goalkeeping. I was 33 and became the oldest player since World War II to make his competitive debut in a World Cup qualifier. 90% is serious hard work.
So this week's special guest, I'm joined by a professional who has played in over 600 games as a player, playing for clubs such as Portsmouth, Millwall and Cambridge, and also representing the Republic of Ireland on the international stage. I'm delighted to be joined by ex-goalkeeping legend, David Forde. So David, first of all, massive thank you for taking the time to join me here today.
Thank you, David. It's great to be on here. Great name as well. And it's a delight to be on here, yeah. And hello to everyone that's listening in and watching it in. So I've seen some of your stuff you've been doing, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It's great to see the goalkeeping message and philosophies getting out there, and it's great to see so many kids enjoying it, and just brings back so many memories of myself. So yeah, keep up the great work.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. So yeah, so looking at it sort of from the goalkeeping angle then, I mean, taking things back way before you even became a professional, it's interesting because one of the first buzzes that, well, a lot of outfield players get anyway in particular is when you're a kid, you obviously get your first pair of boots. And, you know, people might potentially have boots which, you know, might be replicating a player that they like, or it might be potentially because of the colour or the brand or something like that. But obviously, as a goalkeeper, can you remember what the first pair of gloves was you had and when you got them? And at that stage, did you know that you wanted to be a goalkeeper, or was it kind of just part of, you know, the football attire, as you want to call it?
No, totally. Always wanted to be a goalkeeper. My brother was a goalkeeper, and of course, everyone's brother is their hero. So I just wanted to follow in his footsteps. And the first pair of gloves I had were actually, and I remember them so well, they were an amazing pair of gloves. They were Umbro. And they were Umbro Bruce Grobblers. And you can actually, if you go online, you can actually search them up and type in Umbro Bruce Grobblers. And they were red and a luminous yellow and green and black. And they had on the index finger, they had a picture of Bruce Grobbler arched, diving to make a save. And nice. They were absolutely amazing. They were some piece of kit, and they were my absolute pride and joy. You know, I probably would have slept with them. I probably would have ate with them. Did everything with them, like, you know, and then there was also another in that just reminds me as well. I think I so enjoyed the Umbro gloves at that stage that there was a Packy Bonner Celtic edition, and they had the green and yellow and the green and white of Celtic and stuff. So as an Irish lad, they were probably two of the biggest clubs at the time. And for me, it was absolutely everything. So yeah, that was my first pair of gloves, that's brought back a nice memory.
Nice. And how long did you have them for? Because again, another thing as well is that sometimes you see players, outfield or goalkeepers, who will have their boots or their gloves until, you know, they've literally got holes in them almost, because it's, like you said, it's their favourite pair. But how long did you keep them for?
100%. There was a store in Galway where I come from, the west coast of Ireland. It was called the Great Outdoors, and it had everything. It had all sorts of sports equipment, and I'd even go in there after school just to have a look around, and you'd have the old sport gloves, and they packaged up, and, you know, they were expensive at the time, gloves. So the only time we really got them was probably Christmas or birthday. So it was, and my birthday and Christmas are within 5 days. So yeah. It was one pair of gloves a season. And by the end of it, as you said, there was holes at the tip of it, especially around, you know, your index finger and your thumb, and those three main fingers, you know, were protruding through the latex. So yeah, back then, you know, we didn't really have much, but whenever my mother or dad had the chance or an opportunity, it was definitely for a pair of gloves, or for any little bit of pocket money you had, you'd save up, and, you know, but it still didn't stop you from going into the sports stores and pulling them out of the bags and trying them on and smelling them, and you were just thinking, this is absolutely amazing. Yeah.
It's interesting as well, because you say about that smell. I can smell it now. I can smell that new sort of fresh smell out of those gloves. And, well, I say I can smell the fresh smell of the gloves. I can also now, unfortunately, have that smell of your gloves once you take them off after you potentially play the game as well, which wasn't pleasant.
Yeah, it was amazing, because it taught me so many great habits back then by just having one pair of gloves, because I had to mind them. I had to treat them so well. And I remember the first time I probably got a pair of gloves, and I was playing on the street, on the road, and my mates used to think I was an absolute lunatic. I'd be diving around in the tarmac, diving around the concrete, flying into lads' feet. I was just absolutely wild. And then I realised one day through the tarmac and the heavy, my gloves were getting withered away and stuff. So I had to like save my gloves for the grass and then just use me bare hands and stuff as I was flying around on the streets and stuff. So yeah, it was amazing. And like what you said, it just taught me so many great habits around cleaning my gloves and washing my gloves. And even when I played, even after any game, whether it was an international game or a league game or cup, whatever game it was, I'd always walk into the showers with me gloves on. Everything else I'd be stripped off and I'd be just with me gloves on, washing my gloves in the shower. And lads used to think I was just mad, like, but that was just so ingrained with me, because my dad always said to me, when I used to work with him on the building sites, he said, look, son, he said, your tools look after you, so you look after your tools. So your gloves are your tools. They're so important. So to have them clean, have them fresh, and have lads, and I've had so many coaches that if we ever came with dirty boots or dirty kit or dirty gloves, they wouldn't let you train until you actually cleaned your boots and cleaned your gloves. So we had great coaches back then that taught us great levels of discipline and great ways to prepare.
Nice. I think it's like you said as well, it kind of does teach you so many good habits, and also I think organisation as well, because I'm not being funny with you, but it's so easy just to pick up a pair of boots if you're an outfield player. But if you're a goalkeeper, your boots, maybe your shin pads, and then your gloves as well, and making sure you don't lose them or misplace them.
Oh, it was everything. It was everything, because when you're growing up as a kid, and I was so particular with my kit. I love my kit because I felt my kit was like Iron Man. I felt I could step into this suit and it transformed me into, something that I wasn't. It was something more than me. So when I put on my kit, I used to feel, Jesus, it used to give me a sense of strength and a feel-good factor to it. So I was always very sharp in terms of my boots. I'd always go through this. And even when I was a professional, I'd always be like boots, socks, shin pads, cycling shorts, sloggies, shorts, Under Armour, t-shirt, shirt, and gloves ultimately. So I'd always go through that process of glove bag, all that kind of thing. I'd always have it in my kit ready to go, because I always felt, right, now I feel prepared. And if I feel prepared, now I feel I'm ready to go, because if it was duly down to my own self in that, because if I forgot to do something and I had a bad game, I'd be very hard on myself. So I became very particular around my kit and everything else. And like you said, I've got my shin pads since I think my first pair of shin pads, and I wore them up till my final day, and I only had one pair of shin pads my whole career. Yeah, so they were little Puma, little plastic. With it was yellow foam and black foam by the time they came off, and it was peeled off by the time I finished. But they used to go everywhere with me, and there was times I wouldn't even give the kit man my shin pads or my gloves. They stayed with me.
Nice. It's interesting as well, because again, you mentioned that I think sometimes, like I said, sometimes the older type equipment or type of like products that you use within football, such as gloves, shin pads, things like that, they nowadays they make them so differently. Sometimes they're really uncomfortable. I know they're meant to be comfortable, but they're really uncomfortable. And the design isn't as particular as, say, for example, it was back then. So yeah, it's interesting to see, like you said, you kept it throughout, and it's good to hear that as well, because keeping the tradition of things as well is a nice feel to things as well, I suppose. Yeah,
it was amazing, as you said, because I remember, I'd ask young keepers, I'd say, what size gloves are they? And they'd never really know what size hand they are, what size gloves they are. And I used to be thinking, how do you not know that? It's on the back of the gloves. And I don't know if you can remember that, or there was a time where they'd have the numbers on the back of the glove, and you put your hand and your thumb, you'd line it up, and it'd say whether the width of your hand is a 10.5 or 11 or an 8 or a 5. And I used to find that so fascinating. Like, as I was growing up as a lad, going into the shop, putting my hand on the back of the gloves, going, "Oh, I've grown a size. Like, I'm getting bigger. I'm getting bigger." And that was always a big thing for me as well, because I wasn't 6'4" till I was about maybe 21. So I was always a late developer in everything I did. So even I was growing as a kid, I was probably, I was quite small and quite stocky, and but at the same time, I had these massive hands, just absolute shovels, like, so I was always thinking, hopefully one day I'm going to grow into those hands.
No, it's quality. Well, again, like taking things back then as well, like you said, mentioned about your gloves as well, and you said that, you know, you had the first one of the first pairs that you had, it was the ones where it had, like, you know, Bruce Grobbler on there, and I know you mentioned as well about, you know, your brother being a bit of an inspiration in terms of you becoming a goalkeeper. But in terms of the actual sort of like games, so when you watched games and, you know, when you enjoyed it as a fan almost, was there any particular goalkeeper that kind of stood out for you and you thought, you know what, I would love to be like that goalkeeper, I want to really aspire to be like them?
I was a massive fan of David James growing up. I loved David James when he was playing, and he there was so many keepers even before that, and it's hard to really say, it's hard to really answer that question, because I love goalkeeping. I love the whole art of goalkeeping. I love the whole science behind goalkeeping. And I had so many favourites. And then from that stage growing up, I was born in 79, growing up in the 80s. And then you're coming off the backs of the likes of, you know, the great Dino Zoff and Levi Ashin and all these great goalkeepers that have gone before, and you're hearing about those stories, and you're watching World Cups and you're watching European Championships and you're watching games on terrestrial TV every Saturday. So this is before even Sky Sports.
Yeah.
And you start to realise, you know, today I feel football is very saturated. You know, you can't, every day of the week there's football on, and for me it's taken a bit of the sense of enjoyment and the expectation and that sense of looking forward to a Saturday morning where we'd have, say, Football Focus on, and there was very little shows on at that time, and all of a sudden you had a game on at 3 o'clock. All your mates either pile into your house or you'd watch a game, and you know, you'd be looking back at the old stadiums, and there was, you know, half the pitches didn't even have grass on them, and you know, it was just a whole different type of experience that I think the youth of today don't fully, you know, realize the how blessed they are in terms of the amount of football that they actually have. Where we were always left kind of, it was like dangling a carrot, you know. It was always that kind of like, Jesus, when's the next game on, or who's on, and obviously being a Liverpool fan, they were the team of the 80s and stuff. So it was amazing to look back at that time. Like I've said, Bruce Grobbler, he was amazing. He was so agile, and I had so many different keepers for so many different reasons, because they had so many different attributes that I enjoyed about them. Walter Zenga, I loved Walter Zenga, the Italian great, Inter Milan. Who else was there? Let me see. Peter Schmeichel. Peter Schmeichel was an absolute boss man, probably if not the best goalkeeper. And the only disdain I had for him was because he was Man United. But really, secretly, I'd say nothing, like, you know. And then when the first time I remember seeing him throwing a ball over the halfway line, I thought, this is actually insane. He's after throwing a ball from the 18-yard box over the halfway line, which was insane at the time. It was unheard of. So yeah, there's been so many great keepers. Steve Ogrizovic when he was at Coventry, David Seaman. There's been always a great tradition of Irish goalkeepers, the likes of Alan Kelly. I was a big fan of Alan Kelly, and then I got to work with Alan Kelly. That was amazing. Shay Given. And you know, and even you look at the great tradition of English goalkeepers down through the years, the likes of Peter Shilton, hearing the story about him swinging from the rafters or swinging from his banister. My dad makes a brand new shed, and I'm out the back garden swinging from the rafters like a bonobo, trying to grow a few inches, and my arms getting longer, and just little things like that, like, you know. And it was such a fun time. It was such a great time, like, you know. And looking back at, you know, when I think of you know, acts of brilliance, and there's probably none better than Gordon Banks' save at the World Cup. That if you were probably tried to do it again, or if you probably tried to do it again, you know, it was spectacular, absolute some save. You know, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because again, you mentioned about, like, sort of, you know, the spectacular saves, and I think it's interesting because, you know, when you're a kid as well and you're playing football, I don't know if you ever experienced it, probably, but, you know, when you're playing with your mates, and say, for example, if someone gives a penalty away and you go, right, be a penalty, all of a sudden you have every single person who's not actually in goal, let me be in goal, because they want to experience that.
Actually forgot about that. Yeah.
And saving, and it's incredible. Then as soon as the penalty's over, out a goal again, and they're back out on field. So it's interesting because we want to replicate some of those, like you said, those amazing saves, but then again at the same time, even with sort of, like, you know, set pieces, or like you mentioned about the Peter Schmeichel where he's able to throw it so long, I think, again, one of the interesting things for myself sometimes when I played in goal when I was younger and talking to a few goalkeepers was seeing how far away you can kick the ball. And, you know, you have the ability just to be able to boot it as far as you can. And it's such great, genuine memories, you know, whereas now people might talk about the dribbling in and out of players, but then it was the saving and it was the kicking it as far as you can elements of the game, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Like all those as you said, those little incremental gains that were massive challenges for yourself. Like me and my best mate, his name was Ryan Casey, and he went over to Swansea when he was like 15 or whatever, and he played for the Irish under-18 team that finished the European Championships back then. They beat Germany and won the European Championships under-18, and it was an amazing feat at the time. And I remember him just going across to England thinking, wow, that's absolutely spectacular. But there was a huge part of me gutted because we were like brothers. We weren't only just best mates. We were just like absolutely brothers. Like, so we'd finish school in the afternoon, grab our bag. As soon as that bell rang, it was absolute carnage, straight out the door. And we lived about maybe 2 miles away, and we'd run home with just the expectation of, there was no even thoughts of doing homework. There was no even thoughts, and it was just right. We just want to get out onto the pitch, want to get our ball, get out onto the pitch. And there was all these like telephone poles through on the roads on the way home. So we'd run one, jog one, run one, jog one, and we used it as like interval training at such a young age. And we didn't even realize what we were doing at the time with big heavy bags. At the time, there was no like handouts from school. You had about 25 bucks in your little satchel. And getting home, you'd come in, drop the bag off, straight up, put your kit on, and we'd meet back down by the bottom of the alleyway and go across to the pitches across the road. And it wasn't until probably his dad had come in maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night screaming in the dark going, lads, where are you? Time to go home. And we had to get dragged up off the pitch. And we just absolutely loved it. And he had an amazing left foot, which probably benefited me because he was so cultured. He could stick it into top corners and put it wherever he wanted. And I'd be flying after them. It was heaven.
I suppose as well, it's interesting, and I suppose, like you said, a bit of a blessing, really, that, you know, as a goalkeeper, you kind of, you obviously you want to be, you know, close to your goalkeeping friends, and obviously you want to share ideas and take things away, habits away. But I suppose, like you said, it must be a bit of a blessing in disguise, because I know that if I'm an outfield player, of course I want a friend who's a goalkeeper, because I just wanted to be able to ping shots at them all the time.
Yeah, nobody wanted to play in goals, especially when I was younger. So to have someone that was like willing to play in goals, and then after a while, then you start to develop and you're starting to get better and better, and you're starting to make absolutely ridiculous saves, and they're starting to get peed off because they can't actually score, and you can just see their confidence just dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And even that was amazing when you'd say go to a club or you'd come to a new club when you're a professional or whatever else, and that challenge of challenging you against them. And it was, you know, that thing of, right, I'm going to save as many balls as I can here. And after a while, then you can just see lads' kind of confidence. There's a respect in it. There's like a little transition that happens. And it was like, he's actually decent, but at the same time, he's killing my confidence here. And then you had to be mindful of, well, he's my teammate. I can't be actually, you know, putting I suppose, and nailing them like that, like. And then there's times where I suppose you're confident, and you know you're getting to absolutely everything. You're in that flow state. You can actually see everything as it's happening. And there are times then where you're low on confidence and you can't get near a thing, and balls are just flying past you. So it is it's a serious dance, goalkeeping.
Yeah, and like you said, it's such obviously a particular area. And I suppose it's funny as well, because you mentioned about, like you said, sometimes you don't want to overkill your teammates' confidence. I suppose it's almost like the dad moments where, you know, their child has a shot and you go, oops, oh, it's gone in. Unfortunately, just to allow them to get their confidence up. But as well, like you said, in terms of being a goalkeeper, like I said, sometimes we really do live for those moments, I suppose, where it's like you said, the elements of saving, it's the protection, it's, you know, nothing's going to get past me, and that you almost don't even need the game to an extent to be competitive, because your competition comes in, like you said, just making sure nothing goes past you. But then obviously as an outfield player, it's, you know, potentially the scoring the goals element. Was there ever a stage, I know you said obviously you always wanted to be a goalkeeper, but say for example, if you couldn't be a goalkeeper for whatever reason, and maybe that wasn't the pathway in which your career took, was there any other positions in which you kind of really sort of felt a close relationship with. Because sometimes when I talk to players, they almost say the opposing situation. So if I talk to a fullback, they say a winger, because that's the person who they're constantly studying within a game. Would you have wanted to be a striker, or is there any other positions in particular?
I'd always have to crack. I'd always have to crack if I ever went out field and say feed the bear, like, you know, and they'd probably a touch of me like a JCB, like, but my position really, and what I had an affinity towards, is probably, and what comes to mind is the number 4. I used to love that number 4, that holding midfield role. You know, that holding, you know, that kind of aggressor, that type of, you know, you can assert yourself on the game, you can control the game, you can move it about, you can be so influential and so part of the game. And that was a big part of me as a goalkeeper. I found very difficult, was because I was quite a vocal presence, and I love being in the mix of things. By being a keeper is, you know what, you can't actually involve yourself too much. So I love that whole aspect of, right, if I'm in the mix of it, I can keep my full concentration and focus here and get yourself about. And that probably came about through my GAA background, playing centre midfield in Gaelic football. And I just love that whole aspect of it. And it was amazing as well for the skills and the attributes that intertwined with soccer as well, because, you know, as a goalkeeper, more so, was fielding high balls under pressure from 4 or 5 other players, and just the whole sense of physicality of it. I just lived for all that kind of thing. Like, so then to go back into goals where you were being so involved in the mix and in the center of everything, to be on the periphery and then to be called on at certain times and spaces, it was just a whole different type of challenge, a whole different type of experience. But it was it came to a stage where I was like, right, I've got Gaelic football here, or do I want to be, you know, a goalkeeper? And my whole dream was always to play for Ireland. So I just came to that stage, as you normally do, maybe 14, 15, and you have to make a decision, whether that's tennis or hockey or whatever sport you're actually into, whatever sports you're into. You have to make that decision. So I made that decision probably around 15. I was like, right, I'm going to put my head down here and do my best to make it as a professional goalkeeper.
Nice. It's interesting as well. Again, you mentioned about the sort of interlining sort of you know, transferable skills almost, because I think one of the big debates I have with a lot of coaches and players necessarily as well is the whole versatile versus specialist. And, you know, nowadays we see a lot of players and they're encouraged to sort of play more than one position. And don't get me wrong, that's good, because, you know, if some people say if you're a footballer, you know, you can sort of almost avoid the spaces in any position. However, I do feel, and I think obviously, especially with goalkeeping as well, it's such a specialist area. And, you know, to understand the position in which you play, it's more than just, you know, understanding what a midfielder does, understanding what a goalkeeper does. There's all the technical side of things, there's the psychological side of things, there's the social things of your relationships on the pitches. You know, as a goalkeeper, who's your closest relationships? Well, obviously, you potentially have your back 4. You know, if you're looking to play the ball long, then potentially it's your strikers. And it's all of these external things. But it's interesting as well, you mentioned about the sort of, you know, again, making a decision, because I think I saw a study when I was at the FA on Jack Butland. And I think they said that he was a late bloomer as well into his position, or into football really, because he, I think originally was a rugby player. And again, there's so many transferable skills. I mean, in rugby, you're constantly catching the ball. And, you know, again, in Gaelic football, we have some of that as well. So I suppose there's these transferable elements, which without actually knowing it, you're almost preparing yourself for that sort of position anyway on the pitch, which obviously potentially, like you said, is in goal, where you're kicking and catching the ball.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's very valid in what you're saying, because it is a specialist area. And it's understanding that it's not a robotic area. It's understanding the position and the role, but ultimately it's understanding the individual, and it's understanding the person. And it's you know, when I do the work I do now with working with people on a one-to-one level or within teams or organizations, it's, you know, my whole motto, my whole approach is person first, player second. And when we start to approach the different types of people that we actually work with, and you've worked with so many young men, we've all worked with so many people in so many different areas. And I had a great goalkeeping coach called Tony Burns at Millwall, and he was like a father figure to me. He was such an amazing man and a fantastic goalkeeping coach. But he never tried to push his techniques, or he never tried to push his style onto me. he always felt that we all have our own unique style and way of doing things, and it's about bringing that out in the goalkeeper without making him too robotic and changing his whether it's his plyometrics or whatever it actually is, his hand movements or where he's comfortable. And it's about really, for me, about really understanding the different constitutions of various different types of players and goalkeepers, because we all got our own strengths, and we all got our own areas we need to focus on. And if we can focus on those areas, absolutely great. We can actually make incremental increases. But we never when I was certainly growing up, it was always a focus on my weaknesses. And all of a sudden, when someone starts talking to you about a weakness, you actually think it's a weak. So when we start to, I just those little tweaks in the mindset of people around areas to focus on. Now all of a sudden it's a different ballgame. Now all of a sudden my left foot is not so weak anymore. Now all of a sudden I can ping a ball 40, 50 yards, and those little switches in the mind are absolutely massive. So when we start to kind of work at that level and the deeper levels, from, as you said, from a psychological and from a social aspect, where we go remove ourselves away from the technical and the tactical aspects, it's even more important. And I've been blessed to have some amazing coaches, amazing mentors, amazing teachers in my life that taught me those basic principles and foundations that were huge for me, that when times got difficult and times got hard, that's when I could go back to my foundational levels and actually realize, well, this is my style, this is who I am, this is the way I'm going to practice. And that always gave me a base layer to move from. And then what came then with age and experience, and that's just my nature. I'm an open and adaptable type of person, where some goalkeepers can be fixed, and they can be fixed in their ways. Other goalkeepers can be open, flexible, fluid, and adaptable. The majority of them actually are. And I was always, I love learning. I love knowledge. I love information. I love wisdom, culture, psychology, philosophy, whatever it is. And I'm always open to understanding different points of view and different perspectives, and implementing them and trying them and experimenting and thinking, right, if that works for me, it doesn't. So even when I was, just to give you an example, even when I got to probably, I didn't get my first call up with Ireland until I was 31. I was 33 and became the oldest player since World War II to make his competitive debut in a World Cup qualifier. And I remember training with Shay Given one day, and I was having a chat with Shay, and he was going about his goal. And like what you said, I was just observing, just witnessing, because that's probably one of the greatest skills we have as goalkeepers, our ability to observe. And he was making he was going up to his post, he'd step a yard out, and he'd make an angled 45-degree line across from his front post that was on his left shoulder, goes over to the other goal. And he used to do this all the time. And I was like, what is that about? And he pulled me aside and he said, right, that's as far as my inside foot will go towards the front post. Because if I overcompensate on that side, I'm leaving the full goal open. And I was thinking, geez, that's genius, because I got just done at that the weekend. Because I had this paranoia that we're always told, and you see it on TV nowadays, you see Carragher, you see Neville, and you see all these people talking about goalkeeping, and they haven't got a clue about goalkeeping. Yeah. They're even getting into positions and getting too low on TV. And I'm thinking, what am I watching? What am I seeing? And it is so frustrating, because as we said, it's a science, and there's a lot more to it than, and the timing of it, how quick these things happen during a game, split seconds, absolute split seconds. So that weekend I got beat. I crossed my goal, but I came off the pitch thinking, I could have done better, should have done better, but I'm probably okay. I've probably self-preserved myself a bit here. Like, the manager's not going to have a go at me because I didn't get beaten me near post. Instead of thinking, right, if I'm being brave and get into a brave position, now I can make an absolute save and save the team. So there are these little things, and I got that, maybe that was an absolute gift that I got into my 30s. And it changed my whole way of how I performed as a goalkeeper, and elevated my performances, went through the roof. So yeah, it's open to learning, and it's a game changer when we adopt that type of approach. And going back to I know I'm rambling on, but going back to the original point, really, as you said, it's understanding individuals and understanding the type of keepers that young lads are, and what works for them. That's what I feel. That's my personal view on goalkeeping.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think the point you made about the coaches as well is so important, that, coaches in my eyes are always so fixated on the hows of things, whether it's outfield players or goalkeepers, are always fixated on the how to do things, the technical and tactical things, as you mentioned. But I agree. I think, if they're able to actually effectively, adopt players to have an open or growth mindset, then all of a sudden it doesn't become the how elements in which we're working on with players, but it's the where, whens and whys. For me, they're far more important than the actual hows. In terms of obviously how long you actually spend on a ball, or whether it's at your feet or your hands, is so minor compared to the compared to the when, wheres and whys of a game. Why are players moving in a certain way? Do they want me to pass them the ball? Are they saying that they're ready to receive it? When am I going to make these, like you said, these movements? Like you said about Shay Given, why is he doing this with his feet? Obviously, you've got that understanding. Once you have that understanding, you can then implement it into the where and when. Where and when do I use it in a game? Where and when do I use it against which opposition? And I think that they're the key things. The where, when, and whys massively outweigh the hows. And I think that it isn't until you potentially, like you said, start to have more growth mindset, which hopefully coaches implement onto the players, that then you start to really, like you said, become more effective within your decision making and problem solving actually on the pitch, rather than just the how am I going to pass the ball, how am I going to save it type aspect.
I totally get that. I totally get what you're saying in terms of the how, in terms of a tactical aspect of how I'm going to use the ball and stuff. But where the how comes into it is from a psychological aspect and a social aspect. It's because what I found was, it wasn't what I was doing at times with football. It was how I was actually doing it. Because now all of a sudden, when you become a professional, you can get so engrossed in the intensity of performance and the intensity of succeeding, and always getting to this kind of fictional, illusional kind of place of, I'll reach this place, I'll reach this pinnacle, and when I get there, I'll be happy. And then you actually forget about the journey getting to that place, and you forget about the fun, and you forget about the joy and the excitement. And that's what I say to people I work with all the time. It wasn't what I was actually doing. What I was actually doing, I love football. My mantra is do what you love and love what you do. And there was times in football I fell out of love with the game. I fell out of love with the game because of that level of professionalism, that level of self-determination, that level of drive, that I was driving myself into the ground. I was driving my mind into the ground, where I never had that ability, or no one ever coached me in terms of, right, how can I steer my mind? How can I steer my psychology? How can I steer my thoughts, my emotions, all those interfering patterns into a healthy place to actually understand them? And then we started, as we said, not about the how, it's as you said, it's the how we're actually doing it. And there is it is a major factor. And like what I said, it's such a vast science, like what you were saying, in terms of the how, the why, the where, and the when. And we start to understand then why I'm actually doing something, or why am I afraid to do something? Why am I fearful to ping that ball 30 yards or 20 yards? Why am I afraid to clip it over the centre half? Have I got freedom in it? Has the manager given me that level of expression that I can go and explore it and go and give it a go and give it a try? Or if I make a mistake, am I going to get absolutely nailed? Am I going to get nailed by the players? Am I going to get nailed by the manager? Who's going to stand up? Who's going to protect me? Are they coaches? Are they fans? Are they going to come on me? So as a goalkeeper, we've got so many different things coming on that actually affect our decision making. And when we get that going on with our decision making, then all of a sudden it breeds doubt. And doubt is a killer for goalkeepers, because now it's, should I stay? Should I go? And I was always told, if you're going, stay gone. So that's kind of the background I would have come from. And it is amazing. It is great to have these types of discussions. And as you can see, I'm fairly animated, and I'm actually so enjoying this conversation, because it's great to speak to someone that's like-minded and just loves the game. And it's difficult to find someone in the goalkeeping realms that will sit down and have these types of conversations. So it's great.
Yeah. No, I think, like I said, I think it's important as well. I think, like I said, it's so often neglected in terms of, we see things in a certain way. And I think, again, you hit the nail on the head earlier on when you mentioned about, understanding the person before the player. Again, if, like you said, in terms of as a goalkeeper, if you're thinking about certain ways in which you're making decisions, or why you're doing things the way you're doing them, like you said, if you're kind of thinking, oh, well, is the manager going to get on the back of me? Are the players going to get on the back of me? Well, if they don't understand the person, then they might do. But if they understand the person behind those decisions, and the person behind those actions, then, you know, there's not going to be that animosity. There's not going to be that sort of, I mean, it might be a bit of an annoyance because people hate conceding goals and things like that anyway, but, you know, it's that whole aspect of, if they understand you as an individual, just like how you understand the outfield players or the manager as an individual, but in terms of making decisions, who to play, who not to play, then, you know, it allows for that sort of, okay, I get why they're doing it.
Yeah, and that whole approach didn't come to me till probably late in my career, and that was probably when Ian Holloway came along. And managers up to that were pretty regimental, and they had styles and way. You know, it was kind of that transition between modern day footballers playing with their feet to, you know, being absolute quarterbacks now, where, you know, you look at the likes of Kasper Schmeichel today, where, you know, he can shell the ball all over the park and put it on a sixpence. And some of the, you know, whether it's I forget his name, the man at Barcelona.
Ter Stegen,
yeah. And these keepers that, you know, all of a sudden now they become an integral part of the system and the way keepers are playing, and that level of evolution. But still, at the end of the day, that's great, and it's great if you have that ability to do it left foot and right foot, and the way the game is evolving in that space, and that's fantastic. But the ultimate thing for a goalkeeper, for me, is our ability to keep the ball out of the net, and by hook or by crook. You know, it's sometimes, you know, technique will always give you that foundation, but sometimes by hook or by crook, you have to use whatever body part, whether it's orthodox or unorthodox, to just keep the ball out of the net. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what I love about goalkeeping. As you said, that you have a foundation, you have a basis, but at the end of the day, it's just that challenge to keep the ball out of the net. And there's nothing more I love than a clean sheet. I just absolutely lived for clean sheets. Everything I did was a clean sheet. Love clean. And you ask anyone I've ever played with, and I just thrived off clean sheets. Even if we were winning 4-0 and we didn't keep a clean sheet, by God, that was not good. So yeah, it was certainly interesting.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, it's that competitive side, and, you know, you have your competition on the pitch, but then you also have your competition with yourself as well. And obviously, throughout the conversation, you've mentioned some interesting points in terms of, like you said, you know, wanting to keep clean sheets, and, you know, wanting to perform well, and, you know, all these key aspects, and they're the reasons why, obviously, in terms of in playing in goal as well, why you love the game. And obviously, it's probably really hard to pinpoint this, but if you kind of look back on, you know, you've had an amazing career, like you said, you know, 600 plus games, you know, you've represented your country as well, which is the pinnacle for a lot of people. You know, they want to do that, not obviously only just play club level, but then also going on international stages as well. What was the one thing for you which you just loved the most about playing football? Was it the whole element of being in goal? Was it just the fans, or was it the stadiums, or what was that one thing that just blew your mind?
There's so many elements to that. There's so many elements, but I believe the one that trumps all that is the camaraderie, is the unity and the togetherness of come together as a team, and that being in that challenge and being under so much pressure and coming out victorious. And it's a total peak experience. And it's, for me, it sums up, you know, the beauty of the human spirit, you know, that people can come together, share a common goal, and go to work together and then achieve it. And, you know, understanding the challenges that you're faced with that, and you overcome them internally as well as all the external forces that are coming in on top of that. And you actually realize that, you know, any time I've been in successful teams, and I've often said that, is it's probably happened to me maybe 3 times in a whole career, that I can look back on a team that I can actually genuinely call brothers, that's been part of a fraternity, that's been part of, you know, I think of, you know, they even wrote a book on the family about Millwall, and that whole experience and what that was actually like for a group of lads to come together. And, you know, that bond was so tight, and it made us, you know, it overcompensated for everything else that we were lacking, whether it was ability or quality or whatever that actually is. That sense of unity trumped everything else. It was absolutely massive. And I've had it probably at Portsmouth when we got promoted and won the league. And at Derry City when I was back playing in the League of Ireland, when now Stephen Kenny, the current Ireland manager, was at the helm and stuff. And with just a special bond of players, and that is so special, because when you look back at times in football, and everybody has a perception that football is rosy all the time. It's probably rosy percent for about 10% of it. The rest of the 90% is serious hard work, a lot of hard work, and there's more downs than there is actually ups. So when we start to look at it from that perspective, and what keeps us together is that sense of, as I said, that sense of or whatever that actually is, like,
Yeah, 100%. And again, similar to, people, I'll call it work, but as a footballer, it isn't work. It's what you want to do, and it's fun and it's enjoyment. But like they say with work, you're spending the majority of your time of your life really with these people, and like you said, if you can have a harmonious environment, and again, on the coaching course, is the big thing about it, setting a good environment, setting a positive environment, so that you can get those things which come out of it. Because like you said, you're going to be with these people, and you're ultimately all working together to try and achieve something. And if you can have those connections, whether it be on the pitch or off the pitch, it's going to make it such more an enjoyable environment. And also as well, in terms of sort of that psychological element of it as well, the self-esteem rises, the confidence rises, because you're all in it together. There's not just one person who's left out to the side and things like that. So I think, I definitely agree. I think that sort of harmonious, compact brotherhood is so important. But on that point as well, a bit of a funny one to kind of mention or bring up, obviously within games or before games, a lot of the time they speak about players might put on music before a game to get them in the sort of mood for things and such as that. Have you got sort of any sort of songs which you can remember which were ever put on before a game in preparation for a match, or were you ever given the opportunity to put any sort of music or any sort of rituals before a game started in the change room from your own experiences?
Yeah, for years it was always, as you said, the playlist, and then some playlists are absolutely horrific. Some music was absolutely brilliant, and because you have such a diversity within the team, you'd have had some old players and they're into 70s and 80s, some players that are into hip hop, R&B, some people that are into rave, some people are hardcore, hardcore dance music. There's so many different things, and then you'd hear the music come on, and there was a bit of fun in it as well, because there was a bit of banter and a bit of crack of like what you're listening to is absolutely crap, and it generates that bit of fun, and turn the next song off and turns it off and someone's raging, they're like, that's my song. And so there was years where a manager would be like, right, you all get a chance to pick your song and play your song or whatever it actually is and stuff, like, and then what happened was then usually the bad ones then were probably edited to the end, so we probably never got a chance or an opportunity to hear those songs. Jesus, there's been so many songs down through the ages. There's been so many different songs that it's hard to pinpoint any one song. Yeah, so yeah. I'm a lover of all types of music. Whether that's, I listen to a fair bit of country and western music at the moment. Nice. Of whether it's the Bee Gees to Oasis to U2 to jazz music to whatever. I love all types of music, so I think it's just me Celtic Irish background, yeah.
I think it's interesting. That's why I mentioned it as well, because people criticise them a lot, and I think it's so unfair. But you see players walking into stadiums now, and they've got their headphones on, and it's such a big thing though. In terms of, I think I agree. Music for me it can get you into certain moods. Like if you listen to, not to knock any rock fans here, but if you listen to rock first thing in the morning, you're going to be really hyped up. You're going to be sort of like, adrenaline overload, compared to if you listen to potentially some mellow music and things like that. So I think that, getting sort of the right music, and like I said, even if it isn't the right music, hopefully it doesn't put any players off any games. But like you said, it kind of brings that sort of banterous side out, if you want to call it that. And, it's another form of connection with the players, getting to know them on a deeper level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to know them, what they like and what they don't like and everything else. And music for me is so emotive. I could be driving down the car and I'd stick on a song, and next thing I could be in tears. It'd bring up a memory of a past time with me dad, God bless him. Or it could be a time where, as you said, we win at Wembley and we win a game, and I hear that music and I think, geez, I haven't heard that song for so long. So music is so potent. It's so powerful.
Yeah, totally. And I think as well, it also brings out the singers in ourselves as well, where we all consider, is football the right pathway, or is should I appear on maybe X Factor next year or something?
Yeah, I think I'd be better off on the one with the, what you call it, the man behind the mask, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Behind the mask, yeah. I'm thinking,
Nice, quality.
I think I've got a good voice, but it's absolutely shocking. So, yeah, it's
Best for the
absolutely
changing room then.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just humming the showers. Just
No, it's quality. But then again, like I said, you've had an amazing career, obviously, playing through different teams, both at club level and international level as well. Kind of looking across sort of like, all the environments in which you've been within. Again, a bit of another fun one, really, I suppose. If you were, say, for example, captain, and you got brought down to your five-a-side local power league pitches, who would you kind of bring with you and put in that team in terms of players that you've been able to play with, whether that be technically wise or, like you said, maybe that connection that you've been able to build through brotherhood?
It's a difficult one. Every time I hear these questions, it's just the anxiety it brings up in me, the stress it brings up in me. I'm just thinking, oh Jesus, because it's amazing. My mind finds it so hard to actually even remember who I actually even played with. But yeah, if I was to look back at probably a five-a-side team, and some of the players I was blessed enough to play with, and I probably think of the likes of John O'Shea, who was, he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal man, and he had such an amazing career, and to get an opportunity to play with John at Irish level. And like that as well, we all have, I suppose, perceptions of players and what people are actually like before we actually meet them and play with them. And, John just blew my mind away when I actually got an opportunity to actually walk out onto a pitch with him and play alongside him, because he was a phenomenal footballer, and he was definitely a player that was seriously underrated. And you look at what he won at Man United and everything else, because he was such a utility player. That's how good he was. You could put John anywhere. Probably stick him in goals. He probably wanted to go in goals for the penalties. So John was phenomenal. Let me see who else. Richard Dunn. Richard Dunn was unbelievable. Anytime we had a five-a-side, and his pace and power for such a big man was awesome. And I remember like that, getting to know him and getting to see him in training, and you'd be talking to players, right shoulder, get tight, and he'd just give you a little thumb up, and it'd make you feel really uncomfortable, and you'd be thinking he's there, he's in, and next thing, ball goes from boom, and he's over there and across there, and you're absolutely going, geez, this guy's an absolute steam train. He just had his style and the way he played, and it was all under control. And yeah, he was phenomenal. Seamus Coleman was, I couldn't leave Seamus out there. Seamus was so intense. He was like a little terrier. He was just loved winning. He had a great attitude, and he was a phenomenal, just marauding up and down the sideline. James McCarthy was exceptional, especially as you said, when it came to five-a-side games and even first team games. And I still don't believe that he probably fulfilled his potential as of yet, because he's probably one of the most composed footballers and probably the best touch I've ever seen. He'd be just absolutely glued to his toe. And Wes Hoolahan, absolute little magician, and he's still smashing it at Cambridge, my old club, at the weekend. And I think he's man the match every week at 38, 39. And like that, he was a late developer coming from the League of Ireland, same as myself. And him in a five-a-side, no joking, he was magic. And he was magic on the pitch as well. He did so well for Norwich for so many years, and he was a little genius. He was a little magician. And then Robbie Keane up front was an absolute goal machine. And just watching his movement and watching how he moved and his level of finishing and his ability to finish was sublime. So there's so many players I could go on to, even playing with Steve Morrison at Millwall. He was massive for us at the time. And there's so many players that you could pick from and choose from. So I think I've named a seven-a-side team instead of a five-a-side team.
You're allowed a couple of substitutes.
Counting wasn't always my strongest point.
No, it's quality. No, listen, it's a fantastic team, and I think it's interesting as well. Like you said, obviously people hear the names and they think, "Oh, wow, what an incredible team!" But like you just said as well, in terms of some of the reasoning behind that, and I think that's kind of again, part of the reason why I asked that question, just like you said, goes back to again what you said earlier on in the conversation, understanding the person rather than just a player. I mean, we see players, including yourself, and we get perceptions, not saying necessarily bad perceptions, but we get perceptions of what people are like and how they are, even as a footballer, in terms of how they play and decisions they make. But I think, like you said, when you actually go into the environments and you get to know these people, and they become even more greater in terms of the characters that they are than just what you see anyway.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you hear things as well, never meet your hero and stuff like that, but I've met many of my heroes and they were absolutely boss men as well. And plus, I've met ones that haven't been so good. So
taking it, they won't get in your 5-a-side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, take it as it comes. Yeah, it's just part of it. Yeah, so no, it's amazing.
Quality. Again, like I said, you've had an unbelievable career, and obviously it's good. Like we spoke before, hearing that now you're going into, say, a new field. I mean, obviously still in football, but now you're going down sort of the coaching and mentoring route, and you've obviously got your company called Pathfinder. So do you just want to explain a little bit around what Pathfinder is and how it's sort of growing and what you exactly do?
Yeah, so Pathfinder Coaching and Development was something that emerged for me through I was playing, and I thought, right, this is definitely a field in terms of what is needed within the game to move it on. And what I started to go back and study, whether it was different forms of psychology, sociology, cultural, whatever that actually is, therapies and everything else, and then I found myself going back to university at Portsmouth when I went down there on loan, and just even the serendipity of all that actually happening at that time when this course popped up and I was going there on loan, and I thought, right, this is synchronicity. This is for me. So to go and get my master's in that and train with the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and that was a journey in itself, and to educate myself on that level. And then I thought, right, how can I help young footballers? How can I help young men and women of today to achieve their visions and their goals and dreams? And I always look, and I always said, I wish I met my mentor when I was a lot younger, when I was in my 20s, or that someone that could actually guide me through that. And then what I do nowadays is high performance coaching, where it focuses on the emotional and the psychological requirements of an individual or a team or a system. And then you kind of you identify those goals, and then you remove those what would you call them, performance interfering thoughts, and create a flow state. So that creates that kind of culture where you kind of encourage people to achieve what they dream about, like what I said, and then all of a sudden you start to do what you love and love what you do. So for me, understanding goalkeeping, as I said, observation and all those different communication skills that I've learned, they just came together into this role, and it was just something that I feel natural to go and do. And when I started to understand the power of focus and concentration and the level of mind energy that's required for a goalkeeper, so when so we can be so fully present in moments we experience. There was a lot of times where I didn't fully be present in the experience, and I missed out on it, so many great times. And that was such a shame, because me mindset wasn't in the right place. So when I start to look at people and working on that, it's been, that we can get into those positions that we can perform and feel that freedom in ourselves to perform, and that we can get into the right kind of shape in our mind, body and spirit. So that's currently what we do at the moment from I suppose a coaching and mentoring point of view around psychology and performance and everything else. And then I also teach and train in breathwork, in terms of working with people's corrective breathing measures, and in terms of how that can enhance and how that can motivate and generate clarity and focus and concentration, as well as rest and repair and recovery on the other side. And it was a practice that I probably started 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And it was given to me by a yogi in India. Okay. And he told me to practice these certain practices, and how it transformed my performance, because now I got my mindset into the right place, as well as it got physiologically, got my whole every system of my body operating and stuff. So at the moment, I hold classes every morning on them, and I get people from all walks of life, football, accountants, whatever they be, coaches, whatever it is, come in and join me. So I'm really enjoying. As I said, I probably should have retired years ago, but I'm still here today, and yeah, that's what I'm doing, and I'm just loving what I'm doing, and football and goalkeeping has given me so much, it's just enriched my life beyond means, and this is just another way where I can give that back in a certain way through my experiences and through my teachings.
No, fantastic. It sounds like an unbelievable setup. And I think it's something which is so important as well, because, like we mentioned, I say a lot of times to coaches, that when you're coaching players, you're almost developing the next crop of coaches / mentors, because, if you're able to educate them and give them the sort of tools that they need, then that's the path that they go down. And again, you have the experience, but now as well, what you said, you found out, and again, it's a blessing in disguise to hear that you've gone down the sort of educational route as well in terms of getting your masters, because a lot of time we just purely use our experiences, which is one thing, which is brilliant, but then to also have the education, the understanding, reasoning, learning behind that as well is a whole nother level. So I think, it's unbelievable what you're doing, and I think obviously benefiting a lot of people at the moment, but will continue to as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's important growing up, as you said, to build that identity as a goalkeeper and stuff. But we're phenomenal beings, and that we're far more than what we actually think we are at times. And that was just a side of myself where I thought, right, this is just something I want to explore, another side of myself, another part of myself. And thankfully, goalkeeping afforded me to do that. And there's, as you said, there's so many transferable skills, and ultimately what coaching is, and it comes from stage coaching. Stage coaches to get someone from A to B, and can I get someone from underage to professional? That's ultimately where we want to get there, and then from professional on to being a coach or a trainer itself. So it's definitely it's been an amazing journey, and it's great that I can actually share it today.